Each year, thousands of people lose their lives in traffic accidents. What you see here are grim reminders of those unfortunate enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The people who run these wrecking yards make their living by selling spare parts salvaged from vehicles, some of which were involved in fatal crashes. When I view these remains, I can't help but reflect on the terrible accidents that cost the occupants of these motorized vehicles their lives. Those bleeding to death while frantically trying to save themselves from the twisted metal coffins. The family that decided to take an innocent Sunday drive that ultimately became their last. Hello, I'm Dr. Francis B. Gross, and I would like to invite you on yet another journey through the many faces of death.
Germany is the home of a special unit known as the Yellow Angels. These men patrol the autobahns throughout the country. Each year, they are responsible for saving the lives of victims who have been injured in auto accidents. When this man was hit by a car while riding his bicycle, the expertise of the Yellow Angels came into play. Their quick arrival at the scene of the accident was responsible for saving this victim's life. The Autobahn was a brainchild of Adolf Hitler. Construction began on these roadways in the early 1930s. The sophisticated design of these highways set the standards for high-speed transportation around the world. Last year, over 8,000 people lost their lives on the Autobahn. This motorcyclist was one of those dead. Since there is no speed limit on these roads, the possibility of death increases greatly. When you are traveling at speeds in excess of 100 miles an hour, one wrong turn can prove fatal. Because of the advancement of transportation in the 20th century, most travelers are in a constant rush to reach their destinations. By taking our machines for granted, we can only come one step closer to death. Our perception of speed is greatly ignored, and the concern for our own safety is often forgotten. If technology ever wanted to take advantage of human life, the car is probably its best trap. The human body is no match for the horsepower of a powerful engine. Unfortunately, I see no solution to this face of death. For as long as people drive, people will also die. When layers of fog roll over the Autobahn, accidents become even more prevalent. When a 9-car accident occurred during this weather, a truck driver, unable to see the road ahead, crashed into these cars at 90 miles per hour. His 38-ton truck jammed the cars into one another, and a huge fire resulted. Those who weren't burned to death were trapped and crushed in their vehicles.
During the year of 1980, a major city in the United States became an ideal setting for death. A series of murders had taken place, and to this day, have still remained unsolved.
What can you tell me about the slasher?
Well, this guy's real smart. We've covered 13 murders so far. He hasn't left us a single clue we can use.
Think we'll see any action today?
No way of telling that.
This guy's crazy. Just crazy. He's got all the people on the street just scared shitless.
Well, you two answered the call on the last victim, right?
Yeah, unlucky 13.
Were there any suspects?
None. This guy, his M.O., it's all screwed up. Half the time, he slashes his victim's throat, and the other half the time he goes ahead and dismembers the whole body. I don't know, I guess it depends on how much time he's got.
Tell me about your call on victim 13.
Well, we had a news crew with us that night, too. We responded to a call from an electrical business. We got there, we found a black male about 35. He had his throat cut. At least he was all in one piece.
We got another one here, same M.O.
Jesus Christ. Got it. Hold on here.
God, I'd like to get my hands on that sucker.
Did you get any witnesses?
No, nothing.
Looks like he died in.
A homicidal maniac had killed 13 victims. There can never be justification for murder, but what stood out about this particular set of crimes is that the victims were poor, vagrant winos who had bothered nobody except for one man, a psychotic killer who was seeking some kind of distorted revenge. So the people of the city's Bowery were forced to live in a community plagued with death. No matter how intoxicated these winos became, they still could not forget that a murderer was lurking in their very midst.
I'm the one that called in. I just found my buddy. He's dead over there in that dumpster.
Where?
Over in the dumpster.
The dumpster? I don't know.
Take a look.
Oh, shit.
You gotta be like 2 or 3 bodies in there.
Multiple this time.
Yeah, smash it over here, man. I know that.
The transient residents of this inner city were once again reminded of their extreme exposure to violent death.
I really can't believe it. Honestly, I really can't believe it.
Are you scared about this slasher?
I am afraid of this slasher.
When was the first time you noticed he was missing?
About 3 days ago. I haven't seen him for 3 days.
Did you worry, or was that...
No. Drinking and that there, you don't worry.
I don't know. I just don't know where to turn. I just hope they catch him.
Yeah, me too, man. It would be a good thing if they did catch him. We wouldn't have all this trouble on the street, you know? Yeah, they'll catch him sooner or later. Yeah.
You never know.
Did he look all right last time you saw him?
Oh, yeah, he looked real good.
Okay, and you haven't seen him at all in 3 days?
Not in 3 days, no. No, not offhand. I know him.
The last time you saw him?
About 3 days ago.
Told him not to go out drinking or anything because that man was out there, the one who kills everybody. He went out drinking anyway. Tried to take him to detox, but he wouldn't go. And the last thing he gave me was the dog. And now he's gone.
How do you feel about that?
Very upset. I hope they catch whoever did it and make him pay for what he did. Told him not to go out drinking. Now he's gone.
I've sat around for a long time and I run the skids. I've been on a lot of bean lines. I had a friend who was running with me and he took off one night when I sent him out to get a short dog. He never come back. He ended up in a dumpster and he got cut up pretty bad. I hope they catch that guy, and no, I can't say nothing dirty about him, but I wished I could. I just hope he's proud of himself, and when they catch him, I hope they put him in a gas chamber. That's all I can say.
Are you scared about saying that?
I'm scared. I'm very scared. And I know he doesn't know where I live. And it doesn't matter, because I've been living on the skids. I could stay in any dumpster or any skid anywhere. But he'll find someone. And what he does, he's sick. He's very sick.
When the peaceful community of Castle Beach became a stage for a series of tragic murders of young teenage girls, the people of this small town were forced to live in a constant fear of death.
Yeah, it is.
How many was it on that?
12, 13.
The discovery of another victim would soon mark the concluding chapter of one man's killing spree.
How many did you say?
Looks like 5 or 6. I'm gonna go around the other side of the body.
How long do you figure she's been down here?
From the look, I would say about 1 hour.
Well, was this girl killed in the same way?
Well, at this time, we can't be sure, but the MO appears to be the same.
Is she the same age as the other ones?
Well, she's a female Oriental, appears to be in her early 20s. Other than that, we have no other positive ID.
Was she beaten and stabbed like the other girls?
At this time, I can't divulge any information regarding that.
What's going to be done about these murders?
Well, do you have any similar leads to the other murders?
Gentlemen, excuse me at this time. There'll be no further questions. This afternoon, I'm sure there'll be a total press conference answering all your questions.
Don't you guys realize this is a 7th girl that's been murdered down here?
All right, fellas, keep back.
It would be the last crime the psychotic killer would ever commit. Within a week, he would be arrested in his own apartment, where police would discover evidence of a most fearful nature. But an even greater fear is death. Until his capture, Mike Lorenzo kept the women of Castle Beach in a perpetual state of fear.
On arrest warrant, I went to 7321 Johnson Avenue, where I arrested the man seated at the table.
You made the arrest?
Yes, I did.
Was a search made of the defendant's person or premises at that time?
Yes, there was.
And what did you find?
Your Honor, I object to this entire line of questioning relating to the search of the defendant's person or premises. That search was in violation of the 4th and 14th Amendments of the Constitution.
Counsel, you are aware that this is not the proper time to make such objections. You are overruled. Proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer, would you please tell the court what was found during the search?
I found a video cassette and 6 Polaroid stills.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like the video cassette to be identified as State Exhibit A and the 6 stills to be identified as Exhibits B through G.
So ordered.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to show the video cassette to the court.
You may proceed.
Mike Lorenzo ended his reign of terror by committing suicide in a courtroom holding cell. Taking his life by his own hand was easier than facing society's retribution. Sociologists are in general agreement the dynamics of a city are highly conducive to crime. When a person is forced to live in a world where overcrowded sidewalks and the continual sound of traffic prevent even a brief moment of repose, an emotional retaliation will eventually happen. Such was the case of Lucas Washington, an unemployed factory worker who could no longer deal with the city in which he lived. Equipped with an M1 rifle, he declared war from his apartment window on the city of New York. A young female hostage managed to survive the shootout between Washington and the police. Suffering extreme emotional trauma, this innocent bystander is still under psychiatric care. In the aftermath of this heinous crime, she will be plagued with horrible nightmares for months to come. No one will ever understand the real reason behind Lucas Washington's violent outbursts. When a man is forced to lose his pride and sense of self-respect, revenge becomes his only alternative. Out of feelings of insecurity and fear, he must find a new course to regain a feeling of importance. If the death of others becomes a means to that end, tragedy follows. The people of this neighborhood in New York City will always remember the effects Lucas Washington had on their community. The unassuming wilderness of southern Florida's Everglades is the entry port of 70% of all marijuana and cocaine imported into the United States by plane and boat. To a visitor, the Everglades remain an unblemished wildlife preserve. But drug smuggling is this region's major industry. The area is so vast that the actual chance of capturing a drug smuggler is highly unlikely. But when night falls, under the light of a full moon, the increased traffic by the smugglers affords law enforcement officers a greater chance of success.
There they are.
Although it will be a long time before these two men again smuggle drugs, they represent only a minute percentage of the drug trafficking community. The mangrove canals of southern Florida are another heavy area of drug transport and receiving. When a news team accompanied park rangers who were following up a tip of an alleged drug pickup, a real-life human drama unfolded.
Now approaching buoy 28. Okay. Look, that looks like our boat over there.
This is Florida State Ranger Department. You are under arrest. Stop your engine and place your hands over your head.
say shit to you. Those bastards are coming right at us. You guys stay down and hold tight. Central, this is Patrol 3 X-Ray Tango. Cleared for yellow tango. Head north, Route 28 towards Stoppers Inlet. 2 suspects are heavily armed and have fired on our boat.
Roger, Patrol 3 X-Ray Tango. Additional units have been alerted and are proceeding to your quarters for backup.
Keep yourselves down. Okay, now put your down. They're slowing down. I've got the driver covered. Okay, we'll keep a close eye on them once it's down.
Keep your hands in the air. Now take your right hand and turn off your engine.
Central, this is Patrol 3X Tango. We have suspects in custody and are proceeding with the search of the boat. One suspect is wounded and possibly dead. Advise emergency units. Keep your hands on top of your head.
Units are proceeding to your quadrant.
After a high-speed chase, the drug offenders were arrested. The officers suffered no casualties, but one of the smugglers was killed. This particular bust resulted in one of the largest cocaine confiscations in Florida history. The contraband discovered on this boat had a street value of $10 million. In this area of the state, about 1/3 of murders and deaths are drug-related. Last year, law enforcement officials seized 3.2 million pounds of marijuana with a street value of $1.3 billion. The most dangerous drug of all is not cocaine, but one manufactured right here in the United States. It is called PCP.
My name is Dr. Stephen Lerner. I'm a clinical researcher in the area of drugs of abuse. For the last 6 years, my associates and I have been studying the drug PCP. PCP is a very dangerous drug. PCP was originally developed by Park Davis in the mid-1950s as a surgical anesthetic, and because of the adverse reactions in humans, the clinical studies were discontinued in the mid-60s, and the drug was taken off the market. Since that time, we've been seeing its use illicitly, not only in the United States, but in foreign countries. PCP users are oftentimes brought to medical settings because of adverse reactions where families, friends, law enforcement may become involved. Many times, in order to subdue the violent PCP user, it may take as many as 6 or 8 large officers. For that reason, they may need to be restrained or medicated.
Nowhere! Hey! Look out of here! We have some help out here. Get out of the way. Get out of the way! Hurry up, Bob. Damn this guy today. Fuck, you're gonna be good. Go on, not going. Not going. God damn it! Asshole, get back over here. Leave me alone! Get him on the gurney. Bubba, get him on. Fucker, let me alone! Ready? Watch that! Get your hands off me! Turn it down. Turn it over. Turn over. Bitches, leave me alone! Get him over. Oh, all right. Move the stretcher. Move the stretcher. Turn me down! Stretcher over. Just watch that. Fuck off! All right, come on. Watch that leg. He's gonna try to get you down. Real tight. You understand me? Go for the cuff. Go for the cuff. Let me go! Okay. Let me go! Hey, Bob, grab him, fucker. All right. Calm me down there. Take it easy. Watch his feet. Watch his feet. Let me go! Okay. I'm gonna get you. All right. Let me go! Let's go. You got him? Okay. All right. Now let's hold the wrists up to the belt. Holiday, Bob. Get the door. Okay. Right. Okay. Hold the belt. Open that door. Open that door. Get the damn door. Open the door. Hey, take it out! Here we go. Clear the aisle out there. Everybody just kind of clear out of the way down here. Let me go! Hurry up! Let's go! Clear the aisle there, Bob. What? All right. Here we go. That way.
is 5 milligrams of PCP. Typically, PCP is smoked, primarily on leaf material. For someone that would take 1 or 2 inhalations on a joint laced with PCP, the effects would come on within 1 to 5 minutes. The drug would peak or plateau within 15 to 30 minutes. The person would stay high for 4 to 6 hours, and ordinarily it would take 24 to 48 hours until the person returned to normal. That's used one time only. For the chronic PCP user, the person that uses at least 3 days per week for a minimum of 3 months, it may take anywhere from several months to several years until the person again returns to normal. PCP users may exhibit altering states of consciousness where they may appear to be alert and oriented at one point in time to be seen several seconds later where they may be combative or even violent.
Get out of this fucking camera. Who are you? Get this camera out of here.
How you doing,
Get that
Willie?
camera out of here. I'm not taking my picture.
Now, I want you to
What's
take
this?
this,
I ain't taking that shit.
Now, he's good for you.
No!
Willie,
He's good
come
for
on.
you. Get the fuck out of here.
He's good for you.
We're
I
gonna
want
have to
it.
calm you down, Willie.
Look,
Take the
he's
medicine.
good for you.
No!
Take the medicine. Take it all the way down. All the way down. All the way down.
Take some more.
All the way.
Right.
Now swallow it. Swallow it, Willie. Okay.
Billy, you see what you did?
Willie.
What you do that for, Billy?
We're going to give you an injection, old man.
You're not giving
Hey,
up.
Doc,
We're going to have to give you an
injection.
injection.
Yeah, we have to.
Hold on.
Come on. Relax. Relax. Come on, relax.
Okay. Slack asshole.
Relax.
Get out of here. I want your
Relax.
shoulder back here.
Relax.
I want your shoulder
Come
back
down.
here.
Come down.
Take it easy.
Come down, huh?
Take it easy.
When this man awakens from his drug stupor, he will once again have to face a reality which he feared and tried to forget. The use of drugs by the general populace has increased dramatically in the last 2 decades. When society has to numb itself against an everyday existence, our quest for medication becomes a subtle way of committing suicide. There is little doubt that when this man's fears return, he will renew his high with an old friend, PCP. The angel of death. For those who suffer from acrophobia, the fear of heights, the thought of parachuting out of an airplane would be insane. For 15 years, Bob Ostler has been a stunt photographer specializing in aerial photography. He climbs onto the wing strut in preparation for filming a parachuting competition. The pilot holds the plane steady until he's in position. The first man out is Mark Adams, a novice, in competition for the first time. Ostler follows him in order to film his aerial maneuvers. The object of freefall competition is to land in a designated area. The first competitor to hit this area 2 out of 3 times wins the event. In his first professional jump, Adams landed directly on the mark. Adams returned to his crew and received their congratulations. As they posed for photographs, he appeared confident about his next jump. The crew carefully prepared his gear for the second jump of the day. When jumping out of a plane 3,500 feet above the ground, a parachutist is totally dependent upon his equipment. After receiving a kiss for good luck, Adams is once again airborne for his second jump. When a strong gust of wind began to blow Adams off target, his crew, concerned for his safety, began to chase the drifting parachutist. Cecil Clemens, the owner of Gatorama, remembers that tragic day.
The most terrible thing that I have ever witnessed was one evening I come out on the patio and I see this man coming down in a parachute, and he landed right in the crop pit. And he just made one big scream, and the most horrible looking face you ever seen on a human being, that was him. And before I could get any help, any way to get him out of there, they had told him to shred.
Grab his leg! Oh, shit! Look what they done to him!
There was nothing I could do.
There was nothing anybody could do. Adams had landed on a target, which this time would cost him his life. I first visited the country of El Salvador 20 years ago. At that time, there was hope that this Central American nation could become a great ally of the United States. Unfortunately, it was a short-lived dream. But this country is now in a state of total political anarchy. And sitting here, you would think everything is peaceful and serene. But what you don't see is a 15-foot wall surrounding this property. When it becomes dangerous to leave your house after dark because of a virtual war in the streets, your own life takes on new meaning. That is the basic reason why I came back to El Salvador. What I have learned is that political ideals are more important than human life. Unfortunately, for the illiterate peasants and the children of this country, it is the men with guns that decide their political destiny. In El Salvador, torture is a common technique used to obtain information from prisoners. The military records these sessions for their private files, and occasionally, public display. Carlos Marino was a man who happened to be in the right place at the wrong time. A seemingly routine investigation had become a horrible nightmare for Carlos. The methods of extracting information are as old as civilization itself, crude but effective. When Carlos did not respond to the interrogation techniques, the pain was increased. The aim was to loosen his tongue through a combination of pain and fear.
Carlos, ¿quién te ayudó?
Soy un campesino, nada más.
Si tú eres un campesino, ¿qué carajo tú haces aquí en la ciudad?
Nada más estoy comprando.
¿Por qué mataste a esos hombres?
¿Matar a quién? No sé. ¿A quién mataron?
¿Estás tú seguro que tú no sabes?
No sé nada. No sé. De verdad, no sé. No sé. ¡Ay! 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 ¡No me pegues más! ¡No! 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 ¡No más! ¡No más! ¡No! 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 ¡Ay!
The merciless questioning continued for hours, and still the uncooperative prisoner refused to give the proper answers. A new set of techniques had to be employed, but first, an unconscious Carlos had to be revived.
Carlos, ¿para quién tú realmente trabajas?
Ya no te puedo ayudar. Ya. No sé. No mates a un campesino. No dice nada. Por favor.
But even in a semi-stupor, Carlos was unable to provide the needed information. Totally disoriented and racked with pain, Carlos was indeed a very brave man, but totally innocent, for few people could withstand this terrible agony without cracking.
Ayúdame. No me quedes. No. Ay, no. Ay.
Carlos, tú sabes que tienes que decirnos quién es y es la última oportunidad que te doy.
The survival of a terrorist regime is dependent upon secrecy. The failure of the interrogation of Carlos Moreno could only be resolved in one way, for there could be no witnesses. No one will ever know if Carlos was indeed guilty. My friend Alfredo Guerra has never wanted to move out of this war-ridden country. He has a firm belief that some kind of political moderation will be reached. I hope so for his sake. As for me, I've just confirmed my plane reservations to the United States. I must confess I feel a bit out of place here. I don't speak Spanish, and I don't have any desire to die in a war in which I'm not involved. But I do have to admit there's one thing I'll miss. Alfredo's homemade tequila. Long live the revolution. On June 1, 1979, police responded to a phone tip that a bomb had been placed at the home of a recently defected Russian artist. Time was of the essence, for the lives of these professionals were at the mercy of a bomb that could explode at any given second. There could be no room for panic. Patience was the key to their success and their survival.
Let's check the fit out. We have an alert here.
Squad, we have an alert.
Fearing that the explosive device might detonate at any moment, the bomb squad had no choice but to disarm it on the premises. A reinforced steel shield was erected to protect the bomb squad observers and the news cameramen.
Okay, we have a destructive device, 7 sticks of Hercules dynamite, 2 battery supplies, quartz clock attached to an arming device. I'm going to try and pull the blasting cap. Going for the blasting cap now.
Bomb squad members are faced with death on a daily basis. Bill Reynolds had often expressed his fear of death at a bomb exploding in his hands. On this very day, Bill's greatest fear became a tragic reality as he experienced his own face of death. Through the mid-1960s to the early 1970s, America was involved in a war that has never really been understood. The locale was Vietnam. A country divided by civil war, hoping to prevent the spread of communism, the United States set up a base of operations in the city of Saigon, where Americans teamed with South Vietnamese to destroy the dreaded Viet Cong. Unfortunately, this was a war which nobody could win. For 5 years, Cliff Friedman had been a news cameraman in Vietnam. His dramatic footage of the war had brought him awards as well as recognition. Many times he would risk his life to get that extra shot that had made his photography so unique. Friedman never carried a gun during his tenure as a cameraman in Vietnam. If he ever had a fear of dying, this footage was a testament to his courage. In slow motion, you'll be able to witness the final frame of Cliff Friedman's life. Although Friedman captured the last moments of his life on celluloid, there are others who claim that they have recorded a mental image of their own death.
I feel very strange talking about this because it was a very personal experience. I had to go to the hospital, and I felt very much alone. I was having open heart surgery.
One of the greatest hopes we all share is the possibility of life after death. The enigma of death has remained an unanswered question since the beginning of time. If there ever was one universal fear, it would have to be the fear of death. The case of Mary Stevens may somehow shed a new viewpoint on this seemingly unsolvable mystery.
My heart stopped. I was dead for several minutes, and I didn't know what was happening. Everything about me was bright red, and I thought, I'm dead. Dear God in heaven, I'm dead. I came out of the red into a white light. Suddenly, I felt very safe. I saw my husband. I miss him terribly. I was so happy. My sister Gloria was there, the people I love. Even my best friend. Oh, God, it was wonderful. Then I saw my son. He was killed in Vietnam, and he looked just exactly the way I remember him. I really wanted to stay there, but I woke up in the hospital, and I was in terrible pain. Yet I'm glad to be alive, because there's so many things I need to do and want to do. But I'm not afraid to die anymore, because I would know that I'll be with the people I love in the afterlife.
This is the police. Do not jump. Repeat, do not jump.
On a hazy spring afternoon in 1979, Frank Maynard was faced with the ultimate decision, whether or not to take his own life. After being out of work for several months and faced with divorce, Maynard decided suicide was his only escape. As his wife arrived on the scene, police felt confident she could deter his destiny with death.
Did you have any idea why he's doing this? You think you could go talk to him?
Well, he's Franco. I don't know why he's doing
Well, come on, get her up there. Is he on drugs or something? Get her up there. Come on, get her up there. Let's go up. Frank!
We were separated for 4 months. I don't know what he's doing.
You'll talk to him?
Posing as a maintenance man, Maynard had gained access to the ledge. At first, his own fear of death prevented tragedy. Living in a complex world, we must have at our command means that are adequate to deal with the complexity. If this does not occur, a grave imbalance results. This particular face of death resulted when Frank's actions overcame his rational mind.
Well, it sounds like a little splash of that liver hitting the floor when you drop it. You know, kind of splashed out, kind of gooey like, you know what I mean?
The negative voices which had beckoned Maynard resulted in self-annihilation. The problems he perceived of coping with daily existence had finally been eradicated.
The man, he just all of a sudden just jumped out of the window. I didn't know what was going on. I was just walking by. Just got a bottle of wine. And I was walking by, and all I seen him jump when that lady yelled. I don't know what happened.
Well, I saw his wife begging him. She said, "Don't jump." He did.
You know the guy?
He sure had a problem. That's all I can tell you.
All I seen was him put the lady in the police car and take her away. I guess it was his wife.
If death brought peace of mind to Maynard, his own selfish decision brought sorrow to the people who loved him and those who watched. What ended as an avenue of escape for one would haunt and cause nightmares in the minds of many.
I was pretty disgusted with the way that everything went today here. There's a guy died here today, you know.
How do you feel about that?
How did I feel about him? I was afraid for his life. There's nothing I could do.
So you really feared for his life?
I did. Yeah. I feared for his life. There's nothing I could do.
Tradition plays an important role in all our lives, and there are often symbols which are associated with the various holidays. On Thanksgiving, it's the turkey. At Christmas, it's jolly old St. Nick. And during Easter, it's the white rabbit. But the Easter bunny is not only loved for his ability at hiding colored eggs. Gourmets around the world have developed a very special taste for this symbol of Easter.
Look at that, Sam.
Oh, thank you, sweetheart. That's very nice. That's pretty. There are also grown men who look forward to receiving their bunnies, but you'll see that they have other things in mind. In 1980, 2 million pounds of rabbit meat was consumed in Los Angeles County. To meet the ever-growing demand, many slaughterhouses throughout America have decided to enter this profitable market. This particular slaughterhouse kills an average of 600 rabbits a day. The byproducts of this creature bring high prices in many different markets. Rabbit's blood is used as a filler for inoculations. Its brain is freeze-dried for use in various medications. Even the eyes are utilized for pharmaceutical compounds. Their heads and skin are ground and used for dog and cat food, while their paws are sold as good luck charms. Quite frankly, I never realized this cute little creature could be used in so many ways.
Please, por favor.
The rabbit's entrails are also saved and used to fatten hogs. The most valuable part of this creature is its fur. Once these pelts dry, they will be sold to manufacturers who will create expensive designer coats and jackets. So ends the saga of a rabbit's day in the slaughterhouse. Fast food has become a lifesaver for those who hate to cook. Aside from the hamburger, chicken is one of the most popular foods in America. The demand for this bird has become so great that in 1980, 4 billion chickens had to be killed to feed the hungry masters. In this particular slaughterhouse, 20,000 chickens are killed a day at a rate of 2,000 an hour. A special machine defeathers the bird, and these feathers are then sold for fertilizer. After a washing process, their skins are singed with hot flames to kill any external bacteria. All of the internal organs of this bird are used. What cannot be eaten will also be sold for fertilizer. This assembly line prepares a chicken for marketplace in 5 minutes. Within another 5 minutes, a high-pressure fryer can ready this bird for human consumption. Hallelujah, America. The location for this face of death is Banco Chao Reef off the coast of Yucatan. Bob Olson was an American expatriate who had set up a small tourist dive business. Having spent several years as a merchant marine, Bob simply got fed up with what he called the American way of life and resituated in the port city of Cozumel. It was here he purchased a boat and set up special underwater tours. Being an experienced diver and avid treasure hunter, the reef presented a perfect haven for Bob. He could do what he loved, getting paid for it at the same time. He never tired of exploring the ancient wrecks on the ocean floor. Every dive would present a new artifact and a new challenge. He would even teach tourists how to feed some of his underwater friends. There was little doubt Bob was a man who seemed to have total control of this alien environment. Bob would often tell tourists before he took them on this underwater tour that diving with him would be a totally different experience. His underwater world was not a hunting ground, but instead an area where people could feed and study the ocean's unique wildlife. Olson respected the sea, and in turn, expected the sea to respect him. Sometimes a man who becomes too overconfident can be just as dangerous as a man who fears too much. Although the barracuda is not considered an aggressor towards man, in this unusual incident, the fish became confused and bit Olson in the face with his razor-sharp teeth. Writhing in pain and in a state of shock, the crew members and tourists worked frantically to save the wounded man. Although this injury had resulted from an accident, it was serious enough to nearly cost Olson his life.
we gotta get some towels down there to stop this bleeding. It's really, I mean,
here's some towels.
It's a mess.
Good. Take these towels.
Okay.
Stop the bleeding.
Jesus, he's gonna need stitches. He's gonna need stitches, man. He's really
Jesus, tore him up so bad. Is there any gauze in this first aid kit?
I don't know,
He's
man.
going under. We gotta get that oxygen, man.
Can we get that oxygen?
Okay, how do we get it?
We need to get it. Okay, press harder, press harder. Don't just keep it going. Just
let me get the gauze.
Tell me by the front of the boat. Get the gauze there. Look, press it on his head. Press it on his head. Okay, we gotta get the Coast Guard too. We gotta call them up. We're not gonna be able to stop. Let me just have a bleeding first. Where's the oxygen? Come on. Okay, get the mask over his nose. Okay, here, it's over his mouth. I'm gonna turn it on full. Turn it on full. Okay, come on, crank it up, crank it up. Get out of that horn and get the Coast Guard. Let's get out of here. Okay. Oh, God, shit, he's bleeding all over.
Bob Olson received 72 stitches in the face, and to this day has refused to re-enter the water. His confidence in the world he had loved so much has been replaced by a complete fear of this element. He is currently under my therapy and is making great strides toward becoming the man he once was. Olson is learning the scar he carries must not prevent him from entering a world which he at one time adored and cherished.
What do you think caused this accident?
Well, unfortunately, this is probably another circumstance where probably very good open water divers tried a highly technical form of diving, which is cave diving, and basically threw their lives away simply because they didn't have the proper training and equipment. Often divers will push themselves, and there's a fine line between something being stressful and challenging, and far too often they cross that line. A lot of times divers that are even somewhat afraid of the water will sometimes push themselves just to see what they can do.
Somebody drowned?
Okay, you were in a tunnel here. Was it kind of winding around a lot? Yeah. Yeah, that's the serpentine tunnel. Probably somewhere in there.
We got really silted out, I think. And that's when I lost them. Oh.
Yeah.
Buddy.
What's the situation?
Well, we had 2 divers go in and 1 came out. This Phil here came out and his buddy is still down there somewhere. He says he thinks they were down somewhere in the serpentine tunnel area. What kind of tanks was he using? 72. Do you know about how much air was still in them?
About half.
Where is that cave?
We can anticipate 1, maybe 2 divers.
Yeah, maybe even more. I think maybe what we should do is go in here, check this tunnel out. If we don't find him there, go back here, look at this one. If we still don't find him, come on back here, maybe go back around, check these tunnels out, this side passage.
Cave diving is perhaps the most potentially dangerous terrain a scuba enthusiast can explore. There is a rigid set of rules which must be followed before one enters this environment. No amount of previous open water experience can prepare a person for cave diving. In this uncommon setting, the hazards are many. For example, when diving in this confined area, the cave ceiling restricts direct access to the surface, so a diver is even more dependent upon his gear. If an emergency such as air failure occurs, the only exit from the cave is the way one came in. Yet many divers, unaware of this logistical problem, fail to plan for such an emergency. When presented with this potentially dangerous situation, the scuba enthusiast must rely totally on his dive light. If the dive light fails, or a diver's swimming technique stirs up the cave's silty floor, disorientation results. The normal response is panic, followed by being trapped in this underwater labyrinth, and eventually drowning.
rescue team that's been down there for some time, you will notify some more divers and have them on standby.
Joseph Ryan had just received his diving certification. He was a novice diver, and yet had a false sense of his own skills. He believed that his experience was great enough to compensate for any emergency. In theory, he probably did understand what to do, but when he became separated from his diving buddy, he simply panicked. At this point, he had little chance for survival. As he feared for his life, he neglected to assess his situation, and in essence, signed his own death certificate. To challenge the unknown and to anticipate a remarkable discovery is one of the greatest lures of cave diving. Feeling a sense of safety is an important factor when one enters an unfamiliar locale. Given this sense of security, a diver must never lose perception of the many inherent dangers which still exist. A balance of confidence and humility must be achieved. Realizing one's vulnerability is an important part of dealing with one's own fear in any given situation. If Joseph Ryan had realized this, he could have saved his life.
There's a fine line between something being stressful and challenging, and far too often, because of a strong ego, we all tend to push ourselves. This is a big boy sport. You have to make up your mind about the risk ahead of time. Once you get in a situation where you regret it, it's too late then. Some people, I think, do have a tendency to push themselves, and perhaps even so because of some people might even have a fear of water itself.
John Ruskin once described the snake as a running brook of horror. There is little doubt the snake is indeed a strange creature, for only their left lung has survived the evolutionary processes which have been necessary to make snakes what they are. Just a long, narrow rib cage with a head at the end. Nor do these reptiles have any antibodies in their blood, so a tick bite, if it gets infested, can kill a highly venomous snake. Yet most people fear this seemingly vulnerable creature. Andy Kokolas has worked with venomous snakes for over 20 years. During this time, he has conducted various studies concerning the behavioral patterns of rattlesnakes. Approximately 100 people die each year as a result of this creature's poisonous bite. Since the rattlesnake's fangs are not suited for biting large animals, when this snake attacks humans, it is usually not able to get in a good bite, so many people survive by default. So when Jerry Davis decided to do some plumbing on his mother's kitchen sink, he accidentally discovered a rattlesnake's nest while lifting up the kitchen floorboards. Before he could react, he was bitten in the hand and immediately went into shock. Within several seconds, deadly eastern diamondbacks were moving about the kitchen. The sheriff arrived minutes later with Andy. Jerry Davis needed medical help, but first the snakes had to be removed. It was by sheer luck that this unfortunate incident happened in Andy's hometown. Since the snakes had surrounded the fallen boy, Andy had no choice but to capture the venomous creatures while they were still alive. Equipped with a special snake stick, Andy had to measure his every move. An eastern diamondback is capable of striking a distance of 2/3 its own body length, so one wrong move could cost Andy his life.
Keep your eye on that big one, Deputy, if you will, please. Okay.
As the snake moved around Jerry Davis's unconscious body, Andy had to quicken his pace. Within minutes, the boy would die if emergency medical procedures could not be performed.
real quick.
Looks like I'm not needed here, so I'll go talk to the
This is
boys.
the biggest one right here. It's a big guy.
Watch yourself.
All right, this is a big rattlesnake here. This is probably the one that bit that guy. Look at the fangs.
How is it?
I'm not feeling a pulse like this yet. There it is.
Let me go outside and get a hold of the paramedics.
Okay, fine. Okay, I'll look in here for some more snakes.
The timing could not have been more perfect. As Andy was capturing the last rattlesnake, the paramedic unit arrived on the scene. In the United States, only 3% of snakebite victims who have received antivenom die. Since Davis had only been bitten in the hand once, the paramedics felt they could save the boy's life.
Fan signal 22. Make contact with Ken.
As the boy's frantic mother was consoled by the sheriff, the professionals performed their life-saving task. After viewing an incident such as this, it becomes easy to understand why most people have a fear of snakes. As Mrs. Davis viewed her son's hand, she immediately associated this horrible experience with every snake she'd see from that moment on. Fortunately for her son, the wound looked far worse than it actually was. A few days later, he was released from the hospital with a clean bill of health. A bad experience such as the one Jerry Davis and his family underwent can sometimes resolve itself with a strong psychological fear. There was fright, there was pain, then momentary panic, and even the fleeting thought of death. Although these emotions may have been warranted, the situation was resolved. For some reason, it takes a long time to forget. A nightmare had been created by a creature that has the potential to kill.
Yep, he'll be fine.
10-4, we'll go ahead and let us know. We'll be transporting the patient shortly. We'll also go ahead and put off.
Stay back over here.
10-4, thank you. Have an IV with you.
Even though this experience will probably never repeat itself, the Davis family will always wonder, could it happen again? And with this thought, they wonder what other creatures lay in waiting for their human prey.
Signal 39 at Greenleaf.
The crystal clear waters of the South Pacific set the stage for a truly horrifying example of death. Milas Goodman, a renowned marine biologist and underwater cinematographer, had set out with a crew from the island of Mopilia to complete a documentary on shark behavior. As the boat approached its destination, the crew began the necessary surface preparation for another day of filming. The expedition had been based in the South Pacific for the last 6 weeks. Aside from hiring a well-experienced crew, Goodman had a great deal of luck with Mother Nature, for the weather could not have been more beautiful. This was to be the final dive of the expedition, and also the most hazardous. It was during this dive that Goodman planned to lure different varieties of reef sharks into a confined area by wiring bait to the coral heads on the ocean floor. By enticing the sharks into a feeding frenzy, they would be placing themselves into a very dangerous situation. Therefore, the crew realized they would only have a limited amount of filming time. Patterns of behavior are all important to a biologist studying a particular animal, but sharks remain inscrutable. When the glimmer of a pattern appears to be emerging, it is very often shattered or blurred by new and puzzling facts. Of the world's 250 species of sharks, only about 10% are proven man-eaters. However, in this situation, statistics meant very little. The sharks encountered by Goodman and his crew were being purposely aroused to expose their aggressive natures for the cameras. As the sharks began to discover the bait, the filming could not have gone at a better pace. Lewis Carroll once wrote, "But when the tide rises and the sharks are around, his voice had a timid and tremulous sound." If Goodman or any of his crew had any fear of death by sharks, they had little time to dwell on this emotion. Although armed with underwater weapons in case of an accident, the crew realized they had little protection against these denizens of the deep. In a matter of moments, Goodman and his crew would realize they had created the ultimate feeding frenzy. A man who had devoted his life to the sea became a victim of his own scientific pursuits. A gray shark had torn off one of Goodman's legs at the kneecap. Most people live in fear of one day being attacked while swimming in the ocean. It is ironic that a man who had no fear of these creatures would eventually fall victim to their deadly jaws. Have you ever been the victim of a crime? Almost everyone has. It can be completely devastating to those on meager incomes. The criminal's mentality is simply, your loss is my gain. These people are the lowlives of society, preying like vultures upon the unsuspecting. We're about to examine the ultimate face of death. Some say it is justified, the kind of death that comes to those who seem to deserve it. I'm not sure that any man has a right to judge another. But I'm a firm believer that God punishes those who do injustice to others, usually in the form of eternal damnation once the evil soul leaves this earthly plane. This time, death's grinning face is in the form of an animal. I call this final chapter, God, spelled backward.
It's another damn call from London anyway. I sure hope so. I wouldn't mind having a quiet night for two. Oh my God! I don't. Oh, give me the gun. Load it, give me the gun, quick. Let him get the gate. He's the owner. Get the gate. Get the gate. Come on, let's move it. Move it up. Hurry up. Okay. Protect the dog. Protect the dog. The dogs are dead.
If the dog is man's best friend, he is also man's best protector. Guard dogs still remain one of the greatest deterrents against the criminal element.
Sir, you should stay back out of the way.
Marvin Jacobs had owned an auto body repair shop for 10 years. After repeated car thefts, he installed a video camera on his lot. As additional protection, he also bought 2 guard dogs to ensure against robbery. On the night of March 14, 1980, 2 men entered Jacobs' property, unaware of the dangers that awaited them. While one of the robbers managed to escape, the other was viciously killed by the guard dogs. The police had no choice but to shoot the dogs upon their arrival.
What a mess. I can't believe it.
The 2 German shepherds guarding the parking lot represented the face of death to anyone who would dare trespass. Sadly, the 2 dogs had to die for performing their duty too zealously. For a human life, even that of a criminal breaking the law, is more important than an animal's.
We're going.
The dramatic footage you are viewing was recorded by the video camera Jacobs had installed on the premises. That is constantly changing, in a society that continues to grow more violent, the fear of death is becoming the plague of the 20th century.
Thank you.